Welcome to the Association's Futures podcast, brought to you by Association Activision. We ask you to join us to discuss the future of the Association's community. How can we build and focus on the many futures we will see during these disruptive times? Let's get started with today's guest.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Michael Butera, your host for Association Futures. And today our guest is Blake Stenning. Blake is a CAE Director of Communications at the Public Housing Authorities Directors Association and a graduate of George Mason University. He is an accomplished communications professional with experience in organizations' mission, vision, and audience engagement by developing and managing integrated strategies focused on advanced programming initiatives, growing brand identity, and building organizational capacity. I have asked Blake to share his view on digital developments in the association sphere with a specific emphasis on how associations, particularly small staff associations, can prepare for technology challenges, including how non-technology small staff associations can advance and prepare for new technologies in the association environment. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Blake. Blake, welcome to the Association Futures podcast.
Thank you, Michael. I am very happy to be here today and looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, thank you for joining us. Blake, as someone who leads communication strategies for a small staff setting, how would you describe the digital reality facing our small associations?
Well, I mean, the reality is that we are, digital transformation is this thing that has, in the last 20 years, just changed everything about how we not only do business, but just live our lives. We rely on our smartphones. We communicate. My young 4-year-old daughter has relationships with relatives via FaceTime, and it's as real to her as anything. And we knew a world that was just complete fantasy. So it's everywhere. The development of new technologies is happening so fast that it's beyond, in some ways, the human brain's capacity to just keep up with things, and so it can be kind of overwhelming at times. And so I think, and particularly with a smaller staff, association or nonprofit spaces, we're constantly trying to find that balance of being up to date as much as we can on new technological developments without becoming so consumed with constantly updating that we're never getting any work done. So it's front and center all the time.
I'm sure that's true. And you've worked in this field a long time. So what do you see as the biggest misconceptions, particularly in the small association world, when it comes to this digital transformation that we're all undergoing?
I think certainly one misconception, or just an ongoing struggle, is like the new shiny is the thing that's going to make it all better. This is the new thing that this is the new device and it's way better than the old device, and just you need to have this thing now. And again, we get on that kind of always wanting to be current, but we lose sight of what is it that this technology is supposed to really be helping us be better at whatever it is we're trying to do. And so I think that's the chasing the shiny is I think a big misconception, that it's really, we lose sight of the fact that what is the problem we're trying to solve, and that's where we should be focusing our attention on, rather than just we should just be doing this now because it's the current thing.
Yeah, well, what an interesting point you're making there about the shiny object. That brings me to this idea of how associations with limited or really no technology IT staff on board, how do you evaluate the digital needs that most affect an organization or that shiny new software that somebody's trying to sell you?
Yeah. So I will speak from, the association I work for. We are a staff of 9. Half of that are policy analysts. So, um, you know, they're they have a different set of needs than like the infrastructure of the organization, which is servicing, members, our events, communications. So we're really like a smaller staff of about 3 or 4 that are really impacted by technology on an ongoing basis. And so, we don't have a full-time IT person. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment because we've made some real strides in really trying to harness technology in some new ways and get better control of it, because we've definitely gotten to, I think, a pattern that a lot of smaller staff associations fall into, and that is by not having a somebody who's really thinking about just technology and understanding those ecosystems and how all those different pieces work together. You know, you need somebody who's thinking like in that sort of organizational perspective of how all these different pieces work to advance the organization. Communications can be thinking about email marketing software or the website, but we're not thinking about the AMS. We're not thinking about events management and or administrative things or accounting. And so that's where I think you really struggle, because you might have one person who's more technically literate or savvy or just has a greater interest in this, and then you've got somebody who is maybe just is not comfortable with it and goes, has like they've figured out, Excel works for them. And so I'm just going to bring everything into that. And I'm just always going to be doing everything in Excel. And that's all I need to do. That's great until like another person needs something and like finds out that, your whatever, your AMS is now actually over here, and you've lost trust of the data. And so that's when you can get into some big problems. So that's like I said, we as an organization found ourselves in that position, and we realized that like there's a capacity beyond, like the technology right now is at such a state that like it does need that holistic view, and that we didn't have that internally, and so we need to look outside and bring in expertise that can help guide us and make sure that we're doing the things and understand, that we have the right training, that we have the right tools to be able to solve our problems. And that's, I think a big part of it is not just the technology, but taking a step back and thinking about what are the problems that we are trying to solve first and foremost before we.
Based on what you just said, I was thinking, in the association sphere, small or large, what do you need to prioritize first? Do you prioritize the tools, the training, the strategy? What comes first? What do you think you've learned in your association's learning? What comes first? Tools, training, strategy, or something else?
I mean, I think strategy has to come first. If you don't know what you're doing, then how would you know you have the right tool for it? I think if you go back to like prehistoric man, when you're creating little flints, like chipping away at flint, to create a spear, what's the point of of doing all that if you don't have a purpose for it? So it's strategy has to come first, and it has to be, again, sort of removed from the technology part. I think so often we think like, okay, we need to grow membership. What's the tool we're going to need? Well, what is that? I don't know what that tool is, because we haven't really defined what growing membership is. And until you have like that really clear, then you're just, again, you're chasing after the new shiny all the time, and not really ever getting to that place where you as an organization really need to be.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Strategy first makes sense to me. On a practical level here, uh, what steps do you think non-technology staff can take to increase their digital fluency, their understanding, before they start going out there and searching for a product or a tool and so forth and so on?
Yeah. I mean, speaking for myself, it's just it's ongoing, constant learning. I mean, you can't read enough. Um, I think it's really important. I've always been, in the time that I've been in the association space. So this company, the organization I work for, has been my entire career in association space. Before that, I was on the other side, as a consultant. But ever since I joined, I've always been involved on different professional development committees, whether it was a communications committee with ASAE. I'm on the small staff one now. Always being involved in you know sort of group activities, networking, to be able to like always make sure that I'm keeping up with what I need to know, with and even pursuing my CAE. It was a need to understand more and to learn more and to broaden my knowledge. And I think that's you just have to always make sure that you are keeping up, especially, again, talk about technology and look at, like, AI suddenly is just seems like it's just appeared, even though it's been around. But its impact on our daily life is just accelerating exponentially. And if you can't, so you can either be intimidated by this, you can be overwhelmed by it, or you can try and understand it. And I think that's really it's, you have to just have a very open mind and just never ever stop thinking that you know it all.
So, in that context, in your experience, are there any really low cost or should I say no cost resources that you've come to use or rely on or recommend uh, for learning about digital tools and platforms, and also if you can just get into this data privacy thing because that's such a concern these days.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think just constant reading. I personally subscribe to a lot of different e-newsletters, so I'm getting updates, and it's everything from you know IT related to marketing related to communications to arts and culture. It doesn't, it's like you want to be broad, because you can glean little bits of insight from a lot of different sources. Um, I think data privacy is becoming a much larger issue on a on a kind of a multitude of levels. One, just our own protecting our own data and being careful, online. Also, the responsibility we have for our members' data, and for example, like with AI and LLMs, if you are experimenting with some different AI models, are you using it on your members' data, and are you using the free version of it? In which case, there may be there are definitely some issues with privacy using member information. So those are issues that we just need to be thinking about. Again, getting back to that idea of, like, how do you, if you don't have dedicated IT staff in your organization, how are you thinking about those kinds of things? Who's asking those questions, and who is taking responsibility? I mean, it's a shared responsibility, but somebody's got to be in the organization just asking those questions, saying, what are we doing about this? Do we understand this? Do we know that this is a concern? So that's
So how we live in this new digital environment, you've mentioned a number of times now the realities of what capacity individuals and organizations have, and competing priorities. So In that context, how do you think associations best position themselves to balance the needs for this digital adaptation with the realities of, staff capacity and competing priorities within the organization?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think in terms of like staff capacity, this is something I've certainly am thinking a lot about recently at my organization, and that is, you've got, especially in a small staff organization, capacity is just crucial, and I think, like, I don't want to look at it as like weakest link, but everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and it may be that you've got a person who's not really utilizing a capacity that would help the organization better than what their current role is. So I think sometimes it's rethinking individuals' role, because it's really important that everybody is, again, a small staff. It's just the teamwork is so much more important, and I think small staff tends to be very siloed because you've got departments of one. But it's more, I think it's critical that you, and speaking again from my own organization, in the time of COVID, we became much more collaborative with departments. We had to shift our priorities of an organization. We were no longer doing in-person meetings, and we were trying to do these virtual meetings, and so we all had to kind of learn this at the same time. So it brought us together. We're on, teams, we're collaborating in these different ways. But because of that, we began to discover a lot of things in terms of organizational workflows, in terms of structure, in terms of who had different skill sets that you didn't know about. So, so I think that becomes, became really important for us. Another good example for our organization in terms of just changing roles, I mentioned we have 3 full-time policy analysts on staff. A fourth recently was changed roles and is now deputy director of our organization. Same person, and suddenly capacity on the digital transformation on our entire IT infrastructure changed in almost, the capacity, again, more than doubled. It's because of her new emphasis and focus. She and I began to talk a lot more, and we discovered, like, oh, hey, we're thinking the same way about this, but now there's 2 of us who have understood that this is important, and now we're bringing, additional capacity. It's kind of like that, from those, I can't remember the business management book about like the fulcrums and, like a seesaw. And if you shift, depending upon where you have that fulcrum, you can, the same person can do so much more. So I think, you really do need to think about, like, what are what the people you have, what are they doing, and where are there gaps that somebody can fill that need.
Do you have any thoughts on when it makes sense for the small association to bring in that outside help to help them make better decisions or to pick the right vendor or consultant? What are your thoughts on that outside help thing? When does it make sense to do it?
Well, so I can absolutely speak to this because we were in the midst of an IT assessment, a massive undertaking. So we discovered, again, as I mentioned, over the past couple of years, we've, some of these our departments have begun to collaborate a lot more, and our reliance on our technology infrastructure has grown. So our AMS, for example, well, this is what really led to this. We discovered that for many years our membership department was kind of the sole steward of our AMS, and there were a lot of complexities to it, or just wasn't sufficient training in some aspects, in some regards. So we began to develop these internal workarounds that, as we started to grow and rely on the AMS more, became these roadblocks, because now we couldn't access data in the way that the AMS was set up to do. And so doing something like updating an email, doing an email marketing campaign, we couldn't pull a reliable list from our AMS, and we were wondering, why is that? And we discovered that we had all these kind of this duct tape and chewing gum holding things together. And so as we began to like just peel back the layers, we saw all of this structural, kind of bottlenecks. And so we began to, and so we'd start to do some research, and we think, you start looking at like AMS companies, and so you bring in people doing demos, and you think like, oh, well, you know what it is? It's just an AMS, and, this demo is showing us like this, if we just switch to this thing. And at some point, in the conversation, we felt like, okay, but it's not just this one thing. And how do we really know? I mean, like, who here really understands all of the underlying complexity of like a member database? And how do we know that if we get this new AMS, it's going to work with our email marketing? And do we have the right tools there? Are we doing things efficiently? And we just started asking more questions, and we realized like we didn't know the answers to these things in a way that we felt like, oh, we know we can make the right decision moving forward as an organization. And so that's when we looked to, a IT consultant. And we decided to go full on with a comprehensive IT assessment that's taken 6 months to do, and where you leave no stone unturned. And they were asking questions and looking at tools that we kind of forgotten we even did, or like, again, as communications, I'm not thinking about our accounting software, but yet like it's critical to all of these other pieces working together. And so that's where, and as a result of that, we thought that, at the end of this, they're going to say you need new AMS. And so it's just really going to reaffirm all of our assumptions moving forward. It turns out that the AMS we have has a lot of the things that we felt we were missing. We just, again, we didn't have proper training on it, or it's, there's been some upgrades that, we just didn't know about. So it really became like the problem wasn't the tool, it was the partnership with the provider, and being able to like ask and get the right things from them. They were solving our problems with job tickets, but it was actually causing more problems, because they were just solving the thing right here without asking about like how this was impacting 5 other areas of our organization.
They answered your question, but it didn't necessarily solve the bigger issue. Yeah,
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They did their job. They did what we asked, but it wasn't what we needed.
Yeah, right. That's great. What a great insight that is. Yeah.
And so as a result of this, we found out that like there is this thing that we never even knew existed called like a fractional CIO. And so we're looking into like bringing in this person who's not full-time staff, but becomes like a part of our organization, is going to look at things from internally, to help us like think about what are the things that we need, what are we doing, what's our capacities, and how is technology going to help service that, help fulfill like the needs that we're trying, the things our members expect from us, or that we need to be more efficient, again, as a small staff.
Well, listening carefully to what you just outlined for us, it makes me wonder, as you and as associations go through this digital transformation that's clearly we're going through, do you see it as more of a technology challenge, or is it really a cultural challenge for the association? I know both are involved, but what, kind of like chicken and egg, do you see one before the other, or, how do you view that issue of technology challenge versus cultural challenge?
Yeah. I think in our case, it's absolutely a cultural challenge. And I don't mean that it's not in any way, to say it's a negative thing that we, it's people's, faults that we just, we were backwards thinking or anything like that. But it's as an organization, you find that sort of you find those workflows that work for you and help get the job done. Smaller staff, I think, is always working at capacity. It's hard to find, and I discovered this really going through earning my CAE and having that time to be, really start thinking in this more strategic way that it's very easy to get involved in the day-to-day kind of tactical thinking of like, I got to solve this problem, I got to get this thing done. But when do you take the time to step back and hit the pause button and start thinking in this more kind of broad, future-focused, way? Sorry, Michael, remind me of the question. I got a little tangent.
No, you were doing just fine. I was talking about the idea of, is it more a technical challenge or a cultural challenge? And I think you're leaning on the cultural side.
Yeah.
If I understand what you're bringing to the group here.
Exactly. So again, I think it is more of this. It's cultural in that it's mindset. When it comes to technology, you definitely need leadership to be on board with this thing. They have, whether or not they want to be involved in making decisions on what software or technologies or even, workflows you're going to use. You need to have that, like, that top level setting. This is a priority for us, that we need to make sure that we have resources for training, because that's a big part of it. You got to make sure that everybody's thinking in that kind of digital way of like, this impacts all other, many other things. So you can't just be thinking about solving your own problem or, fulfilling this particular task. This is kind of the issue we had with our AMS provider, was that like they were doing this and being done with that and moving on to the next thing, but it wasn't helping us as an organization. So I think it's a cultural thing, because the technology, especially the bigger pieces, affect the whole organization. And so you need to be thinking, we all need to kind of collectively be thinking about what impact do we have individually on the organization, and how do we then make sure that the things we're doing help with other departments getting their work done.
I think that's excellent advice. The big picture helps you solve all the other problems. Yeah. And so you have to have a strategic way of looking at that. We're about to wrap up. I'm wondering if you'll indulge me in what we might call a kind of lightning round of questions. And we'll just go with the short answers here if we can.
Okay.
So, do you have a most overrated tech trend in the association?
Whatever the thing that the person selling it saying this is the next big whatever, that's the overrated.
How about the most underrated digital tool or platform issue that you see?
I think the most underrated is the individual user. It's like we focus so much on the technology, we don't focus on the person using it. So I think that's, yeah.
And what's the first thing a non-tech savvy team member should learn about digital work?
What's the problem you're trying to solve? Just focus on what is it you're trying to do, and then worry about what technology you might use.
Do you have a one-word description of a small staff association in the year 2030?
More human.
More human.
Technology is going to make
it.
us. I hope that technology makes us more human. It's right now. It feels like we're in technology.
You have a best technology decision you've seen in a small association?
I have to say I'm very bullish on AI assistance, and so I do think that I think in terms of capacity that is I think there's such promise there. There's obviously a lot of other things to be concerned about with AI, but I see that, like, if we can make it work for us, that's I see as a really great
Is
future.
that the most exciting future for the association, AI?
Well, I think it's it's exciting in that I think that it's going to uncover possibilities and opportunities that we might not have even conceived of before. So in that sense, I do think that like we have a lot of the association industry, and I think digital transformation. This, so I'm not lightning rounding anymore. I'm sorry, I can't.
That's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
But I would say that digital transformation has really upended the association world in a way. It's people don't just automatically join associations anymore and just know that they're going to go to meetings and that's where they're going to network. They've got because of digital transformation, you've got so many different areas, venues, platforms where you can get information. So how do associations remain relevant? How do we serve a need for a constituent? And I think that that's all associations are grappling with that. But I see like AI as this thing where you can start to ask those questions and get some really interesting answers from them. And again, maybe see things in ways that you hadn't thought about before. So I see it as like you have potentially, these assistants who are really smart and you've increased capacity in that sense. Being optimistic about it, and again, you have to. Everything is with a grain of salt, but I think that there is a lot of potential there to be able to make some discoveries, and I think that's really what propels us forward. Is always asking those big questions, being open to different answers, and just exploring.
Blake, I want to thank you for sharing your valuable time with us today. And if someone wants to try to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. That's probably the best place.
Well, thanks again for sharing your time with us. I look forward to the opportunity to check back with you in maybe 6 or 7 months and see just how that digital transformation's coming for you and your association.
Look forward to it.
Thanks. Associations Futures is a forward thinking podcast that delves into the future of associations. Our mission is to help associations and executives navigate the ever evolving landscape by anticipating trends, avoiding short term decisions that cause long term problems. Tune in again in 2 weeks to gain insights, foresight, and actionable strategies for your association's journey. Friends, have a great day. See you soon.